Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our third BPESA HR Forum. My name is Sam Kelo, surname is Blom. I'm the Western Cape rep for BPESA. I also serve in the HR portfolio within EXCO. I will be your MC, or what one ex-president used to call program director for today. We're going to wait for people just to log in before we start. Morning to those who've just joined. We're just going to give people just 1 more minute, and then we're going to start the session. Good morning and welcome wherever you are joining us from the continent. If you're joining us from Dubai, or you're joining us from Guatemala or Ontario, Canada, you are also welcome. Okay, we have got about 36 people. See, there's a comment from the chat box from Clint. Oh, Clint, you're joining us from Gauteng. Will that be Johannesburg or will that be Pretoria? I nearly said Witwatersrand. Welcome, Clint, and thank you for joining us. Welcome, colleagues. My name is Sam Kelo. I'm going to be your facilitator, MC, program director for this event. It's the HR Forum from BPESA. This is our third one. We do have a program, and also we've got a lovely panelist, and also we've got some people that are going to be presenting as well. Please enjoy and feel free to ask and to put your comments in the chat box, because all of us sitting here are coming from human resources. I was wondering, why don't we start with a nice icebreaker just to welcome everyone in the session? Normally, human resources, the word HR is standing for human resources. Can I ask you in the chat box to be creative? What other words could you use for H in HR? And you can put your comment in the chat box. The word H stands for human, but what other words could you put? On my side, I would put the word house, because human remains. Really, Chantel? Really, girl? Is this where you're gonna go? Human remains. What other words would you put for H? I would put house, hopeful. Wow, thank you, Clint. Hopeful and resilient. Those of you who've just joined, just doing a quick icebreaker. What other words would you put for H in human? Yes, happy. 100%, Tracy. We're always called the happy bunch, the tree huggers in HR. High rise. That's interesting, Lynn. High rise, that we are rising, we're getting better, or high rise of interest, or high rise because of load shedding. Love the one about harmony. Those of you who've just joined us, we're just trying to put what other words could we put for H in HR as opposed to human. Any other words coming up? Keep on. Homo sapiens revolt. Wow. Hope, yes, yeah, we bring hope. Luto, thank you. Heart, yeah, thanks, Shona. Humble, HR are very humble people. Thank you for that. Any other words you put for HR? Havoc on Leandra to present. Havoc on Mondays. Adam Walker, could you please unmute and tell us about this? Ross. Adam Walker, if you don't mind. these heroes. Could you please unmute and educate us? What do you mean by that?
Bless you. I actually meant heroes.
Heroes. Oh, okay. So was there a spelling or a grammar educational
there we go.
issue?
It's
Yeah. Okay. Heroes. Yeah.
The H and the R there,
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much. And then there's the R. There's human. Then there's R for resources. In some companies, they use the word human capital. So you can either use the R or the C. What will the R or the C stand for? There's the R for resources. Also, there's a C. So what will that C or that R stand for? Put it in the chat box, colleague, please. Resilient, yeah, it's coming up again. Resourceful, yes, definitely. HR is resource. Some of the things we've had to do for businesses are quite interesting things. In fact, with HR, we could even fix load shedding in another world. We are remarkable. Don't forget the C for human capital, colleagues. What will that C mean? Something around caring, something around being cautious. Just trying to give a hint, ideas. Career coaches, definitely capable. Cowboys, Adam, there you go again, Adam. I'm just worried about you and August and Women's Month, Adam. I'm worried about you and August and Women's Month. Complementary, yes, thank you, Clint. Other people, what would you put for R? In either R for resource or C for capital? Coherent, yeah, I think we are, especially on Fridays when we're about to go home. Calming, yes, on Wednesdays when people have to be retrenched or we have to have an industrial relations or a grievance. Rebirth, did you hear that? We give birth, we rebirth, so we give birth to new people. Does that come with maternity leave? That rebirth, does it come with maternity leave or paternity leave? Resilient. Thanks, Adam. Thank you very much, colleagues. I've had so many exciting words. We are calm, we are resourceful, we are resilient, we are heroes, we are cowboys, we are high rise. Thank you so much for all of you who've joined our HR forum. We bring rebalance, thanks, Sis Nondando. We bring rebalance. We obviously wearing also balance sneakers as well. Thank you very much, colleagues, for the feedback. Really appreciate it. Our first speaker, our first person to open the program is Rashni Singh. She's the Chief Executive Officer for BPESA. She just recently finished a year with BPESA. Lots of wonderful stories and experience. Rash, over to you, Sisi.
Good morning, everyone, and thanks, Kello. Those were quite interesting words that have come through, but I mean, for me personally, I'll definitely say it's all about heart and caring, for sure. I mean, the people in our sector are the most important resource. It's them that actually positions us the way they do in the global community, and they definitely the most important part of the work that we do. So definitely heart and caring from me, Sam Kello. You know, this is our third HR forum, I think, since I've joined BPESA, and I feel like there was a massive break between the last one and the one that we're having today. But some of the priorities that we've, you know, highlighted during the last two forums, you know, still remains a priority. And although they may not necessarily be on the agenda today, I do want to briefly touch on them so that, you know, we all are reminded of, you know, what we need to be working towards in the sector. And but before I do that, you know, when I just mentioned the fact that people are actually our most important resource, you know, from a BPESA perspective, the one thing that we have done since the last HR forum is that we have created 2 new portfolios within the BPESA environment that will be focusing on people. And one of those portfolios is a people lead, and that will be headed by Shona Padiachi, and the areas that should be looking at is everything with regards to people in terms of leadership, in terms of recognition, awards, development, etc. And over and above that, we have Sam Kello that's going to be transitioning more into an HR transformation, diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging kind of role, because as you know, that is high on the agenda of our clients in our source markets, and we need to have a concerted effort and approach in terms of making sure we develop a solid proposition around that for our international community. So those are the two sort of major changes that would align with this HR forum. Like I always say, we have enough going on with skills, and this needs to be strictly focused on the people development part of the work that we do. The other area that I want to touch on is inclusive hiring. You know, we had signed the GBS master plan in November 2021, and during both our first and second HR forums, I did share with the team the importance of inclusive hiring, and the fact that our CEOs have actually committed to 30% of inclusive hiring. Now, typically where we were sitting at a 20% sort of average, we needed to shift that to 30%. And from the statistics that we've seen, obviously, we're not seeing as much momentum as we should. There are a handful of role players in the industry that are doing the right thing and are hiring inclusively, but we're not getting the support from the entire community. And I really want to make an appeal to you all to please commit and understand that when you are recruiting, when you are hiring, it is very important to have a blended approach in how you're sourcing the talent to your organization. So 30% is not a massive ask in comparison to the scale that we sitting with at the moment. And if there's anybody that actually doesn't understand and needs guidance for us to explain how inclusive hiring works, the definition, how you can track and record this within your organizations, please do feel free to reach out to myself or Shona or Tracy Swart as well, who's on the call from Harambee. So we'll be able to assist and guide and advise you with regards to that. But it is an absolute imperative that we all do the responsible thing and we start to give opportunities to those that are most deserving, those that have never been given opportunities before. So that's something I really want to highlight this morning. And hopefully we are going to do some kind of tracking of performance in the space. And at the next HR forum, we're going to be doing a bit of a deep dive and analysis into inclusive hiring and how we've progressed as an industry, because this will be important for us to report to the Minister of the Department of Trade, Industry and Competition. Having mentioned that, you know, one of our key deliverables as BPESA is actually reporting on our growth in the industry, on the jobs that we are creating. And one of the challenges that we're facing with currently is that we aren't able to get companies to share information, granular details around employment with us. And it's becoming a bit of a problem. So the DTIC obviously is able to monitor this growth through the incentive program, but we have a number of other non-DTIC recipients that are part of the BPESA membership base, and where we need to be able to start accessing ID numbers of those that get employed, so that we can, you know, there's so many benefits for us to be able to track the the growth in the sector with details such as ID numbers, because it will also give, our funders, our stakeholders, some kind of confidence and credibility in terms of the numbers that we put out there. Currently, the industry is sitting at 113,000 jobs, but there's a lot of skepticism out there about whether they actually do exist. And I think the onus is on us as HR to be able to prove that and to be able to showcase that. And I'm sure many of you that are sitting here today do know that you all are representing companies where you all are in excess of 1,000 jobs, 2,000, 3,000 jobs at the moment. So it is a reality. I mean, there's buildings to prove, there's people to prove, but we don't have the paperwork. So we've been in discussions as a partnership, that is Harambee, the DTIC, and BPESA, on how do we move forward in being able to get the right sort of data. And the one request that's going to be coming through in the next few weeks, obviously effective from 1 April, is when you are onboarding people, staff, to be able to get them. I know with regards to the protection of personal information, it's not always possible to share details and identities of individuals. But if there could be a clause that's put into your contracts that will say that this information will be shared into a central repository, so that jobs can be tracked, incentives can be tracked, etc. Because ultimately, if we are working towards a GBS master plan of 500,000 jobs, there has to be some kind of tracking and tracing with regards to that. So we're going to put out a communication by the end of this month to ask for this change to be implemented. So for those of you that are on the call, I would appreciate if you could almost immediately start implementing that change by requesting approval from your staff so that those ID numbers can be shared. And we will share where that central repository is going to sit and where that data can be sent through to us, so that we can, track the career pathing as well of these individuals and have more credible data that is shared with all our stakeholders. So that's something that I think is extremely important, and I'd really appreciate your support. The next area that I want to quickly touch on, because I know that it is on the agenda, is the issue around the resource crisis that we're currently facing. So obviously, you all are aware of the kind of scale and the growth that we're seeing. And with that comes a number of challenges, and that is the lack of management specialist and leadership skills within the industry. And the fact that we have to look at ways to solve this problem through leadership development programs, through the boot camp that Shona will be chatting to you about shortly, through various other initiatives that we're currently still trying to put together and be able to share. But I think the important thing is we have to, even within your own organizations, you have to have some kind of plan in terms of how do we develop our own internal talent. And then when you're sourcing, to try and prevent poaching from competitors. There is sufficient talent in terms of these specialist skills and leadership in the domestic market, in the domestic environment, that we could also tap into, that will be able to provide a similar level of service to our international clients. Because the poaching is actually causing pressure on wage inflation. So that puts pressure on our cost in terms of the price that we charge to our end user clients. And that will then dilute the South African value proposition, especially from a cost perspective. So if we continue to poach, it is going to kill this industry, and that scale that we're looking for is not going to come. So we're going to have to find other creative ways of how do we source these leaders, how do we source these specialists, and also looking at other sectors. It could be retail, it could be telcos, it could be travel and tourism within South Africa, where you can actually source this kind of talent. Another area that we are working on to be able to address this resource crisis is also the critical skills visas. So at the moment, we have just completed a position paper, which we will be presenting to the presidency this week, and trying to get some kind of support from government to be able to allow us and to be able to fast track critical skills visas as well, to be able to fill some of those gaps that we currently facing in the industry. So that's something we'd also be able to give you a bit of an update, perhaps at the next HR skills forum. And without, I know Samkelo limited me to 10 minutes, so I don't want to take up too much time, but I think another important area that I actually want to speak about before I hand over to the team is becoming an employer of choice. I think that is extremely critical for BPO operators, because as you know, the competition is really, really tough. We've had 11 new BPOs enter the market in the last year, and that means that everybody is looking for talent. And if we do not get our act together in terms of putting in the right processes in place to keep our staff happy, we end up losing them. And you lose them for a few hundred rands in some cases, which is not ideal, because that just puts pressure then on attrition and on your skills spend and all of those things. So I really would like for you all to start looking at the areas within the organization that you could improve, enhance, and develop so that you can retain your workforce, and that they're not easily susceptible to poaching. So that's the last area that I want to speak about from a priority perspective. And then, yeah, back to you, Samkelo.
Thank you very much, Resh. On behalf of the whole HR community and the vendors that are here, we've given a very good feedback and update. Just a high-level summary, if I can summarize, Resh, something around inclusive hiring, something around job numbers and reporting accurately and validly. And then your last point was around becoming employer of choice. Did I summarize it correctly, Resh, or have I left out anything?
Yes, you left out the resource crisis, which Shona is coming on with shortly. But yeah, the whole issue around the talent shortages that we're facing currently and the critical skills visas as well.
Excellent. Thank you very much. For those of you who joined late, welcome. This is our third HR BPESA Forum. My name is Samkelo. I am the facilitator for the session. We do understand why you joined late. Could have been load shedding, stage 4, stage 7. So thank you for finally joining. Some of you had challenges with the link. So without wasting time, I'm going to give over to Shona, who's going to talk to us about leadership and development and bootcamp. So as always, over to you in Gauteng.
Thank you so much, Samkelo, and thank you, Resh, for the intro. I think to sum up what Reshni was talking about around the leadership crisis, it's Adam M. Grant. He's an organizational psychologist at Wharton. He's a #1 New York Times bestseller, and he does some TED Talks on rethinking and work life. He had a post on Twitter, I think yesterday or the day before, that said, when we hire from the outside, we pay more to get less. Despite costing more, external hires perform worse and quit more. Promoting from within fuels individual growth and collective success. And if there are never any strong internal candidates, that we have failed at leadership development. And I hope that's not the case for our GBS organizations. And this is where BPESA wants to partner with you. And we're embarking on a whole series of boot camps and leadership development programs. For now, we've procured one program, which is the bootcamp program developed specifically for GBS by Tula and Stand. It focuses on two very distinct aspects of middle management and senior management. And I think that is around the management and leadership aspects, which are two distinct but very required in the roles. If you've got a good manager and a poor leader, it's when your people leave. And if you've got a good leader and a poor manager, it's when your clients leave. So I think integrating both of those will give you the best fit for GBS growth and for maintaining and retaining your clients. So just a little bit more about Tula. They provide consulting services and training in the area of operations management, specifically for the BPO sector. Tula is also the only on-track accredited consultancy in Sub-Sahara Africa, and they are also globally recognized for training and consulting. So it's created by professionals from within the industry. And one of those professionals are on the webinar with me. So Gareth, if you can please come on camera so we can get you introduced. Then Stand is a boutique people development consultancy, and they focus on integrating two of your most important assets within the organization. It's the organizational brand as well as the people, and the result is the world's only brand-specific leadership development program. The management aspect of that entire program starts with a 1-week instructor-led program, an 8-week implementation program, and it ends with a presentation to senior management. We've covered the details of this program in our last webinar, and if you would like more information, please pop your email address into the chat and we'll collate all of the email addresses and send you the prospectus. Then the leadership aspect covers building your brand, building emotional and social intelligence, connecting with your people without conflict, how to discover inspirational leadership, and also looking at leader as a coach, as a mentor, and somebody that is able to build lean teams and model leadership for the rest of the teams. So as I mentioned earlier, joining me today, we've got Gareth Pritchard, and he has played a pivotal role in job creation and talent development in the sector for over 15 years now. He is still actively involved in the sector, both through KPPO as well as Tula. And as I mentioned, Tula provides one aspect of the training. Following Gareth will be Adam Walker, who is the head of management development and digital learning at WebHelp. And he comes with a total of 22 years of contact center and BPO experience, 15 of which have been spent in South Africa. So let's start and kick off with Gareth. Gareth, maybe a quick introduction to you, and post your introduction, can you explain why you sought to develop a program that focuses on both leadership and management?
Yeah, thanks, Shauna. Good morning, everybody. Very quickly, it goes back a long way as well. Came here in '97 after almost 30 years at Lufthansa in Germany. And set up the Teleperformance. First, I was the first MD at Teleperformance. Did that for 3 years, and then the local government asked me to continue in that job creation role, if you like, and was part of the BPESA team in Cape Town, and have also been part of the BPESA national team over the years. Some of you on the call will remember way back when, I think it was 2007, 2008, we developed, if you like, the first master plan with many of the operators who are on this call. And part of, or a result of that discussion back then was that nobody was taking up the baton for pushing leadership development. And at that time, we definitely didn't want to, at BPESA, become in any way involved in a training capacity. And the years ticked by, and we realized that leadership was going to be a challenge. We were growing faster and faster, and nobody was really taking on the leadership cause. And about 10 years ago, I asked my board if I could cut some time off my role at BPESA and set up this academy, and they agreed to that. And that's how Tula started. And I think it's important to understand what was behind Tula back then. And I was, as a foreigner, very impressed with the Ubuntu concept because it was something new for me. And I noticed not only in the corporate environment here in South Africa, but also in my old European corporate environment, that there was a leadership that was missing something around caring, wellness, looking after each other. And so we said we're going to try and do it differently, and we brought in the Ubuntu part of the Leadership Academy. And I have to say, we were perhaps before our time. So we literally did wellness within the leadership role. That includes yoga and diets and you name it. And it wasn't accepted by the community. The other part of Tula is the part that's stood the test of time. And I remember when I first joined the BPO sector, I was astonished by the amount of numbers that you needed to understand in order to do your job at a management level, even more so than in my old aviation sector. It was at the lowest level you needed to understand the numbers. So yeah, Shona, I went to India. I was introduced to an Indian company. They'd been doing this for, as you stated, over 60,000 team leaders. You've got to think about that, multiply that by 10. So that was for almost 1 million people. It's a very successful program, and it's counterintuitive in the sense that it does focus on if you like, the systems that a manager needs to understand. What impressed me was that you were able in a very short time to connect a team leader to the goals that the CEO of a company, and you take Teleperformance now, it has I think over 400,000 people. And the language that the CEO of Teleperformance uses is the same language that a team leader needs to understand as well, which is basically what money comes into the company, what money goes out of the company, and how does it disappear, that the money that comes in. So that's your P&L basically. So what Tula tries to do over a period of time is help managers understand the simplicity, if you like, surrounding the core elements of the P&L, so that if we able to explain to a team leader how much attrition, a 1 percentage point attrition change affects the profit and loss of an organization, then there's a straight line to that person's interpretation of what's needed to the CEO of a company. So briefly, what Tula does is it gives team leaders a hell of a lot of confidence to be able to demystify the jargon, the language that normally CFOs would be using, CEOs, and say, this is it. It's not that complex. It's just a bunch of people who've made it complex by giving it fancy names. And I think if I had to summarize the one result that comes out of the Tula program, it's building up confidence. And this is a new analogy, but if I may, just very quickly, and then I'll get on to the second part, Shona, and answer your question. When you drive a car, you're thinking all the time about putting in the clutch, changing gear, looking in the mirror. And I think what we try and do at the end of this course is say, actually, you can drive as a leader, or a team leader, you can also, it can become part of your DNA that you don't think twice about looking in the mirror or indicating or putting the brakes on. It's all, we supply the checklist at the beginning, but our goal is that becomes part of the DNA, so that you just drive and it's part of normal life. So what happened in the Western Cape was that Clayton Williams, who I'm sure you're all familiar with, our CEO at Cape BPO, he comes from an HR background, and he felt that there was something missing from the Tula program, which was very numbers orientated. And he brought in, he wrote an RFP to include a more the leadership part, the empathy part, the softer skills, if you like, and that's where Stand came in. We together then responded to that RFP, declared my interests as a Tula founder. And that seems to be the perfect mix, so that we won the RFP against maybe some of the competitors on the call today. We won the RFP because of that really strong mix of soft and hard skills. And I think Shona might have shared with you the feedback from various companies. There must have been around about a dozen companies who took part. I think Adam Webhelp took part as well, but I stand to be corrected. But most of the bigger organizations and smaller operators have taken part at some stage in either Tula or Tula and Stand. And I personally have never been so, what's the word, fulfilled, if you like, when you see on a Monday a bunch of youngsters going into a class who haven't got a clue what's ahead of them, and by Friday of the first week you see people sitting there emotionally affected by the fact that they've discovered that life isn't as complex as they thought it was, and that they can do it. Yeah. And if I may, and just add on, I think what Reshni was saying earlier, and you've alluded to as well, our biggest problem definitely in the Cape going forward is not the identification of the talent, it's getting the leadership right, because we're growing at a rate that's just ridiculous, and we haven't got the oven ready leaders to accommodate that growth. So poaching is inevitable, and the leaders will be bought, not taught. They'll be bought, and it's such a shame. You've seen it in the Philippines. Of all the problems the Philippines have at the moment, that's their biggest challenge, that people are leaving for a couple of dollars more, and we're going that way. And we want to try and avoid that at all costs.
100%. Thank you, Gareth. You've also touched a little bit around the impact that some of the businesses have seen. What for you has been the top 3 impacts of businesses that have come through this particular program with you?
Well, the good thing about this, and is what appeals to anyone who comes from a corporate environment, is you can measure the success at the end of it. So part of the program is each participant has to identify a KPI, let's say attrition or absenteeism, and they have to, in those 8 weeks where they're away from the course, they have to then let us know through the system what they've done to improve attrition. And they have to, and you mentioned it, they then have to, after the course is finished, go to their ideally the CEO, the MD, or the site manager, and explain how they've reduced absenteeism or attrition or whatever, and how that's affected the P&L of the company. So you'll get someone in a medium-sized operation, 15 people working for them, and they've reduced attrition by 1% over an 8-week period. They convert that into Rand, and then they explain to their MD in their presentation what initiatives they introduced, and so that's the great part. It's entirely measurable, and they can be called out by their peers. They can't just say, I've attended the course and I've got a stamp of from Tula. They've got to literally spend 8 weeks looking at the course content, deciding what's relevant for them, and then explaining to the MD on the final day why they've improved the overall P&L of the company. And I don't attend those sessions, but I did attend one. It was a domestic market operator, and immediately the MD said, well, each of those initiatives will be adopted by every single team leader in the organization. And so instead of having a saving of, say, 200,000 Rand, you've got all of a sudden a saving of 2 million Rand. And the numbers get more and more impressive. On the stand side, it's not quite as not as easily measurable as the Tula side, and it's more of a verbal feedback where you will see that the individuals have grown, they've understood what empathy is all about, they've understood the difference between the various types of agent that they're going to come across, different types of managers they're going to come across. So it's not measured in Rand, but it's more of an emotional and qualitative feedback that's required.
Yeah, it also lends itself to the company's culture, because if you're driving a culture of growth and you're driving a culture of inclusivity, and where you say you put people first, I think that is driven hard through the leadership and how the leadership treats its people. So if you're looking for a test on the stand aspect of the training, I think it's how tangible is the culture in your organization. Thank you, Gareth. Quite like the yoga and the wellness, but so maybe we should look at how we include that into our next HR forum, Samkelo. We can get everybody doing a bit of breathing to calm them down during a busy week. Now, Gareth, one last question before I let you go. How you touched on how poaching has affected the Philippines. How do you see that kind of breaking the South African market if we continue with this behavior and don't develop leadership within the sector?
Yeah, it sounds pretty grim and negative what I'm about to say, but you've also said it, both of you, beforehand. It's, if we don't get it right, we're going to go down the route of the Philippines. And and I think you can make, even with the critical skills visa, you could argue we'll get people in to take on some roles, and I think that's what the Philippines did as well and still do. It's a horrible way to go. We knew it was coming. If we can do something now before we get to that stage, shipping in foreigners would be horrible for, you've got me, and I think Adam's a foreigner as well, talking about it, but we're looking at it, if you like, from the outside as well. And it would just be, it would be, we've got the warnings from the Philippines. We should, and it's been a wonderful success story in Manila and beyond. We ought to learn from their mistakes, and we've, anything that we can do as a group to stop that slide into poaching and foreigners having to come in and run the companies. It's got to be top priority. For me, I was with last night with a large American operator who's new in Cape Town, and they said that was their biggest fear. I don't know if they're on the call. It is definitely not the tier 1 and tier 2 discussion is a good discussion that's happening. The whole country's getting more of a presence. We're not worried about the talent. We're extremely worried about the leadership not being developed at the right time.
Yeah. Thanks, Gareth. So we did a bit of an exercise when we had our previous Exco, and we looked at the remaining 400,000 jobs that we need to create by 2030 as a sector, or that our target is geared in terms of the master plan. You would need 40,000 team leaders. You would need about 8,000 managers, 1,600 senior managers, 400 ops execs, 10,000 QAs, 200 QA managers. I mean, the list is endless. We've got so many positions that need filling, apart from the 400,000 agent jobs that we'll be creating. It's all of the ancillary and support that needs to be created. And unless we're doing it internally, we're doing ourselves a disservice. Thank you so much, Gareth, for your time and your input. I want to now switch over to Adam. Adam, thank you for making yourself available. And I think let's kick off where we ended off with Gareth, just in terms of from an operator's perspective. How is poaching impacting the organization?
Sure. Thanks, Gareth. So my name's Adam, and I've been in contact centres really since 2002. I'm getting dead days weeks ago. And I started at Virgin Mobile, and I got an opportunity to come out to South Africa to help set up the Johannesburg outsource centre, actually. And to be honest, I came here, I fell in love with the beautiful country, and I never went home. So I've had a good explore around South Africa. So in my 15 years here, I've done a stint in Durban. I've done obviously a stint in Johannesburg, and I've now settled in Cape Town. And I've been working for WebHelp now since 2013. So to answer your question, I mean, listen, we're all recruiting from the same pond, and you know, the impact of rapid growth in South Africa has increased those recruitment costs, and has put you know, some of our accounts in jeopardy because we've had so much attrition that has come out of them. And I think, you know, one of the things I've experienced in my years here is, I think you've mentioned it already, is that people move for very little, actually. And that's really what we've been trying to focus in on at WebHelp for the past few years now, is really getting under the skin of that and making sure that the experience that our people have is really focused on our value proposition. It's, you know, our remuneration value is good, our overall package, the culture, what it feels like to work at WebHelp, and we really try to build that up. And of course, you know, we obviously offer ongoing development as part of that as well, but leadership is absolutely key. We spent quite a bit of time actually defining what is our leadership culture framework, what is our behaviors, what do we expect of our leaders, what does good look like even. And once we've defined that, that has really opened up a lot of avenues for us in terms of our development. And I guess, you know, we're starting to see with that focused on our own people, our own company, what it's experienced. That offer that's coming up from the new BPO down the road that might be paying £5 more an hour, for example, actually is not that compelling anymore, because I've got a career opportunity, I've got a future here with WebHelp, and you know, we really wanting to give our people, certainly within the operational space where we're seeing this exponential growth, that there are career opportunities. And I think we've had some amazing success over the past kind of 4 to 5 years, linked in with that kind of whole experience and giving people an opportunity to grow and develop. So yeah, I think, yeah, in terms of fishing in the same pond, I hope that answers our approach in this one.
Absolutely does, Adam. And I think you've answered another one of my questions as well. So the next question was, how has it benefited WebHelp? And I think the answer that you've given previously was around people not leaving for £5 per hour more because of the opportunity to grow. What additional benefits have you seen in your client space, perhaps, of moving people within the organization into leadership roles?
So we, you know, taking a step back, we were very purposeful about, you know, what did we want to invest in. So a figure of about 30% comes up, and I was talking to one of our colleagues on the call today. Actually, 30% of our people is what we were wanting to see grow and develop with our business as part of the growth, particularly in South Africa. And 30% is obviously quite a large number. So where we really focused our time and our effort in was our deputy team leaders, our team leaders, and our operations managers. And say, once we had that leadership culture framework defined, we really took an approach to put in a development approach, a career path, if you like it, which is not a flash in the pan kind of training program. We all love them, you know, a week long, really experiential, everything, but actually something that's much longer than that, something really embedded into your everyday working. And that's really been the key change, I think, in our approach to development. It's no longer a training team that's delivering to you, it's embedded into your daily activities. You know, I've always seen leaders develop leaders, and that's a culture that I've tried to drive within all of our areas. So our operations managers are absolutely accountable for developing their team leaders and are expected to play a key role in developing them. So the whole process that we've set out for all of those managers, right the way through all the organisations, that development is built in. And we spend a lot of time focusing on the job aspect of the role. So taking what you've learned from theoretical learning, from courses, from great online content, from facilitated sessions, but then being able to take that back and actually using it and applying it, getting feedback from your colleagues, your peers, your operations manager in that process as part of that feedback. But I think the other thing that's been a really key difference for us is that we've also gone one step further. So our advisors, our frontline, 80% of our workforce, that's who we're talking about. Those are the people that we really want to make sure have the best experience. So we asked them, how does your team leader live up to the Webhelp values, the behaviours, the culture? And they need to pass. This is an assessment. It's almost like an accreditation, if you like. And again, we've done some clever things with wrapping all this around, but we've built this across a whole accredited framework. So as part of your leadership development, your ongoing development, you're also obtaining a certificate at the end of it, which is a short certificate through the Institute of Leadership and Management. So it's a really well packaged deal. And just to finish off what I was saying there, 30% was what we targeted. Just to give you an idea, today, as we set up, run a recent bunch of figures, our operations managers today, 34% of them have come from our team leader population that has been developed internally, that have completed this whole journey, have completed the accreditation, and they've gone on to take on roles within operations, which I guess is proof in the pudding that it's working. And then, of course, there's all the testimonies, the clients that they say so much confidence in growing their business in South Africa with the leaders that they see in their business today. They understand it, they understand their routine, they speak for people, they speak for values, and they've shown their competency in that. So yeah, it's going well for us at the moment. There's always fine tweaks to make.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Adam. And I think lastly, what advice would you give the attendees that are sitting here thinking about making the investment into their people?
Be purposeful. I think that's don't skimp on this. This is something that needs to be ongoing. It needs to be part of your DNA. It needs to be built into your operating models. It needs to be into the ways you work in. Development is key. If you're going to retain people in South Africa particularly, it needs to be baked in. We've mentioned it a few times, but leadership is something that needs to be grown all of the time. It's ongoing. It's not just going to be a once-off event, a quick thing. It needs to be ongoing, and it needs to be right from the top. So yeah, be purposeful about your development. Be purposeful about investing in people. Awesome.
Adam, thank you so much. Gareth, again, thank you so much. I think to everybody, we've got your email addresses. A key takeaway for me from Adam is be purposeful. And I think that has been the mission of BPESA throughout the changes that we've implemented, is that all of the changes are purposeful. It's around how do we develop the sector from a people perspective. We've seen top talent that has been recognized as top team leader through the awards get promoted into ops manager roles. And those are the things that excite me and that it excites us as an industry, is when we can start seeing people have long-term careers in the sector. It will attract more people, number one, to the sector, but it will also show them that there is growth potential and stickability within organizations, and that will largely reduce our attrition and poaching that happens across the sector. Please look out for a joint article by Adam, Gareth, and myself in our next newsletter, where we just dig a little bit deeper into maintaining and retaining your talent through leadership development. And thank you so much, Samkelo. Back over to you.
Wonderful, Gareth. It was good to see you here. I was hoping that part of you learning the African culture would also, if you join these sessions, and I'm the facilitator, I'm like the chief of the village, you would bring something just to introduce yourself, maybe a cow, a goat, or a sheep in keeping with the African culture, but I'll accept it digitally. Adam, very good points on leadership. very good points on developing talent. Sure, I'm happy to allow just one question from the audience, just to be happy. If anyone has got a question, just to be fair to you, Adam and Gareth as well. Is there anyone who's got a question for Shona, for Gareth or Adam? I'm happy to allow that, sure. Any questions? Nope, it doesn't not look like we've got any questions for you, Adam, Gareth, and Shona. And moving on, right, to the next part of our program, we've got quite a number of people who are on this call. Nita, special welcome. Apologies for the challenges on connecting. Sure, you've got your hand up. Go ahead,
No
Sisi.
problem.
I do. Thank you. Sorry, Samkelo, I did forget to mention that there will be a RFP that goes out in the next 2 to 4 weeks for our training providers to also supply us with their leadership development and management development courses, which we will also put out to sector. So everybody who's put in the email addresses will receive the prospectus for the Tula and the Stand program, but they'll also receive emails and invites for when we have all of the other procured leadership and management training programs. We want to make sure that our sector has access to all of the material that's out there that we've procured for them, that will enable us to grow those 40,000 team leaders and managers and QAs, etc. So please look out for that as a reminder.
Okay, spot on. Thanks, Shaw. We've got quite a number of people who've joined this call who are vendors, who are service providers, who provide services either in the IT or people space, and who are members of BPESA. If you don't mind, just putting in the chat the name of your business and the services that you offer, whether that's leadership, that's IT, that's recruitment. Just put the name of your company and the services that you offer. We've been receiving some feedback that some of our vendors and members would also like in sessions like this, they can just get people to know who they are and what they do. Just the name of the organization you work for, and also what services that you offer. Please, not long stories about Dear John or falling in love or unpaid debit orders. Just the name of the company in the chat box. We do leadership, we do recruitment, we're an IT services company, so that people can see over there. Just giving you just 1 minute to enter it in the chat box, please. If you are a vendor or a service provider and you are registered with BPESA. And those of us who are in HR, please take a note. Thank you. Just want to be fair to our vendors and our suppliers who provide services to this sector, to give them this space, you know. Thank you, Sistando, Business Processing Outsourcing Services. Thank you. Are there any other vendors? Nita, I'm struggling to pick up your name or anything. Are we on load shedding level 9 on your side, Nita?
No, I'm here. I said hello earlier. No, I'm here. It took me a while, but I am here. Good to be here.
Okay.
Thank you for having me.
And Tria and Sis Andisa, feel free to put in the chat box who you are, the name of the company, and also the services that you offer as well, please. We're just giving time for our vendors and our suppliers who are part of this call, just to say, this is the name of our company, these are the services that we provide. Please feel free to put it in the chat box. Thank you, Sis Nomzamo. Okay, as they are busy typing and putting the comments, one of the feedbacks we've been also receiving from the HR space is to know from our HR people. Thank you, Sis Newo Makene, Customer Experience BPO. Thank you, E-commerce Development Fulfillment. We've been receiving feedback from HR people wanting to know how can we help some of the challenges that they have as HR people. So in the chat box, if you're sitting in this call, you are in L&D, you are in HR, you are in recruitment. What are the 3 pressing people or HR challenges in your business or organization presently? At a high level, for you, you are in the HR space, you are in the people space, you work for a particular organization, BPO, shared services, ITO, you are in this call. for your business, for your company, what are the 3 pressing HR issues or people issues for you? Something around talent, something around leadership development, something around attrition. Sam already mentioned something around higher salaries for up to 40%. Just put it in the chat box at a high level. Just put the themes, please. Could either be a leadership theme, could be a theme around performance management, around employee engagement. Just put the theme in there, please, colleagues. If you're sitting in this call, you are in the HR space, what are the 3 pressing people HR challenges for you as a business? Oh, wow. Thank you, Cindyane. Something around attrition. Wow, attendance keeps on coming up a lot. So we've got vendors putting who they are. Oh, wow. That's interesting, Chantel. It speaks to what Sho and Gareth and Adam are wanting to do. Thank you, Lohini from Flux, just saying what you do in terms of HR and L&D, creating interactive digital learning as well. What are some of the challenges, those of you who are from HR, that 3 top challenges that we are facing at the moment? Anything around a hybrid working model, how to keep staff motivated while they're working at home? Anything around grievance or industrial or managing performance or delivery? If you are in HR, what are some of the biggest challenges? Or sometimes even finding talent. We do have people who run recruitment agencies who are also sitting on this call as well. Mental well-being, wow, that's mental health. Yeah, that's quite big. It's coming out a lot, even globally as well. Thanks, Bronwyn. Poaching of talent, Rashni also spoke about that as well. And there's mental health. Wow, so how to retain the material? Thanks, Nita, I see your feedback. So we've given our vendors a chance to put what is it that they do. Also, we've given our HR people to say, for us in HR, these are our biggest challenges that we are facing as a company or as a business. Thank you, and please continue to put your services or your biggest challenge. Hey, Clint, Brandes, thank you for that. Something around empathy, dealing with conflict at work. Training and development has come out a lot. So is mental health, so is attendance, so is attrition, so is talent. Sho, any comments on your side? I saw something around leadership development skills. Are you happy, Sho? Any comments on your side on what people have written in the chat box?
No, I'm all good. I think those are really great topics, and some of what we're going to be covering later on in the HR forum also covers some of the wellness aspects. I think this is really good feedback to work with, and it gives us really good content for our next session, which, to Reshni's earlier point, we won't have to wait that long for. Yeah. So thanks.
Excellent.
Okay.
Thank you very much. So, and I see it's not down the road there, new recruits having access to high value data and treating it with integrity. I like the use of the word new recruits. At one time, it's not down. I thought we were talking about people joining the US Marine and soldiers. Then I remembered, no, we're talking about employees joining our sector, the call center or the shared services. Colleagues, without wasting time, we are now going to move over to our next speaker, who's not going to be long. She's already said as well. She's just challenged with her camera. It's not a load shedding issue. It's not an issue because South Africa has been grey listed. It's not an issue because the public protector report has been leaked. Honestly, she has a problem with the camera. Tracy, if you just introduce yourself, where you are, and then the topic. And of course, this is Tracy Swart.
Good morning, everybody, and we are really great to be part of this third HR forum that BPESA is running. Having some conversations with the BPESA team earlier in the week, we just thought it would be appropriate to mention some of the initiatives taking place between government and some of the partners that are committed to the global business services sector. So I'm Tracy Swart. I'm from Harambee. Most of you would know that Harambee has partnered with BPESA to try and enable and accelerate the growth of the sector to give as many young people opportunities as possible. Part of the work that we're doing is a lot of that is very research based. And I just wanted to share that if you haven't received already, you could be receiving a link to a survey that is coming out this week. Some of you may receive it last week, some of you may only be receiving it this week, but essentially the requirement for the survey is to start to get an understanding of the spend that companies are making on unaccredited skills training. I think a lot of you would be aware that some of the more accredited training programs are not necessarily ideally suited to global business services and not necessarily to digital either, and that a lot of organizations are fast-tracking people through much shorter training interventions that are actually meeting the needs of the specific outcomes that they're looking for. And as a result of them being unaccredited, are not necessarily getting the recognition for that spend. And so we are in the process of trying to lobby for changes to this, this environment and to the recognition of that spending. And the only way that we are really able to do that is to support that by, information from the sector. So if I can really just, ask that all of the BPESA members that have received the survey to please take the time to complete that. It will have benefit for you if you are spending a significant amount of money on unaccredited training. We're going to try and get the DTRC to increase the recognition in category G interventions to 50%. And I think that should have an impact for a number of companies that are doing these kind of training interventions. So even with training like work readiness, etc., that is not accredited, that skill spend would apply for the survey. So as I say, if I can ask, if you haven't received the link, please reach out to your local regional rep. We have tried to make sure that the most appropriate person in the organization would receive the link, but that isn't always the case. So if you haven't received it, reach out to Shona, Samkelo, Yogan, and or Lynn, alternatively myself or Reshni, and we'll make sure that you get the link. And if we can just please ask you to try and complete those surveys, as soon as possible, so that we can get that information collated and submitted, with the ask from the sector. So thanks very much to Samkelo for giving me a time slot just to raise this important issue. And hopefully we can come back post the survey with some positive news regarding that spend recognition.
Ngiyabonga. Thank you very much, Tracy. Are there any issues of clarity or questions for Tracy with specific reference to what is mentioned around the survey? Please raise your hand, or you can just unmute and feel free to ask Tracy, please. Any questions for clarity or concern for Tracy? Tracy, it looks like your presentation, your articulation and ability to present information was spot on, because there are no questions. And just a friendly reminder, please do complete those surveys, as they do help a lot in terms of the work that we're trying to do in this sector. Now we're gonna hand over to Sis Andisa, the Chief HR Officer for FloatPays. You can see she's got an image on your screen of a mountaintop somewhere in Tanzania. Colleagues, I know you are panicking now. You are worried, thinking that we're going to be asked, all of us, to go for Mount Kilimanjaro or to climb the Andes. Rest assured, we as BPESA are not part of her program. This is her own personal agenda. Our HR friends, don't worry. The only climbing we have to do in HR is to fight for better salaries for us in HR. Ms. Andisa, without wasting time, over to you. You can just introduce yourself and the topic as well. Thank you, Sis Andisa.
Excellent. Good morning, everybody. Can you hear me? Samkelo, can you just give me a heads up that you can hear me?
I can hear you on my side. Yeah, Vakala, Sisi. Thank you.
Wonderful, wonderful. Good morning, everybody. As Samkelo said, I promise I will not be making anyone climb anything, but I'm incredibly grateful for the opportunity to come and address this community. My name is Andisa Liba. I am the Chief People Officer at FloatPays, and a big part of my job is really to engage with multiple HR communities. I guess on the topic that is top of mind, I think for a lot of HR leaders, around, how do we define employee financial wellness? What does that look like? And I suppose particularly as we are almost emerging out of the pandemic, right? I mean, I think, we are seeing, the extent of the impact, right, that this has on people's finances. We've got a very challenging economy globally that's really challenging us. And of course, the answer to all of these isn't necessarily to pay people more money, because that's not the silver bullet, but really it is to rethink and to recalibrate. How do we define, financial wellness, other compensation, models that we have in our respective organizations? Are they fit for purpose? Do they make sense? Could we perhaps explore alternative offerings that can work side by side and kind of be really complementary to what you already have? But before I get into today's, just minimize this, into today's conversation, really, I think what's been interesting for me is kind of watching some of the trends. And as I said, I speak at a lot of forums that engage with a lot of leaders. And I'm comforted by the fact that when Samkelo asked for this a little earlier, some of these themes have been raised by this community. So what is clear from a priority perspective is that conscious leadership and ensuring that people are led and they're led effectively, is a big priority piece. People are feeling the pinch of the change management. I think we've tried different iterations of recreating what the world of work looks like, whether we're coming from hybrid, whether we are coming back to the office. And there's all of these changes that have kicked in. And I think our people are incredibly fatigued with the amount of change that they're being subjected to from a work perspective. The employee experience, and I've loved the quality of the conversation even earlier, and I think some of the comments from Gareth, just around, the importance of, I think, carving out career paths, whether you're figuring out learning labs, instituting things that, help you as you create, a better, employee experience that really speaks to your EVP, right? So I think when we engage with candidates, and I'm certainly seeing it, I've just gone through a recruitment drive where, candidates would ask me, what else do you guys offer, right? What's on offer? What's the experience? Like, what is it like? In my organization, we're fully remote, so we don't have any offices. And for people, that isn't always an appeal, right? Like, people are wondering, how do we then create an experience that is welcoming, experience that encompasses who they are, and what does that look like? And of course, I think the recruitment piece, perhaps top of mind for this particular community, is sourcing and finding the right candidates. What are the strategies you have in play to attract good talent and to retain people? I think the traditional methods we've all learned, are no longer suffice. So how can we rethink and recalibrate around how do we bring talent in? Because there is a war for talent at the moment. Everyone's earmarking, top talent. We all are trying, to retain them whilst we can attract them. And I think lastly on this list is the future of work. And I think we've been having this conversation in different HR communities over the last 5 years. What does that look like? Do we collapse structures? Do we rethink the role of managers versus leaders? The work experience in its entirety, like, what does that look like? So if we were to say we're progressive thinkers and we're wanting to think ahead, competing with the likes of, American outfits that keep descending on our shores, right, with a very, very different flavor of culture. I was talking to somebody the other day, just around, some of the cultural nuance of, of an AWS, right, who are really, really big right now in Cape Town. And I think there's other iterations of a lot of these American companies that come and they introduce our talent to a very, very different style of, I think, of a work environment, different style of leadership. And so we constantly have to be thinking about what does that look like, and, and how best can we set ourselves up, to have employees that stay with us more than 18 months. I think we're seeing the shift where particularly I think that the younger employees, that move is happening almost at a 12, 18 month window. And of course, the costs that come with that, right? We're feeling that as business leaders. But before I get into my presentation, I would just like to ask, financial well-being, of course, is an important dimension of the employee well-being experience. And it'll be interesting to gauge, I think, from the audience, and we'll get to that in a bit. Like, what does that look like in your own organization? And maybe I think as I get through these next two slides, apply your mind to that, because I would love to have a conversation that's engaging. My slides and the purpose they serve as a framework for the conversation. So I'm going to try to not do death by PowerPoint, but to rather have an engagement. But if we define wellness, and I think in this modern age that we're in, we've seen that shift where people need a lot more from us, right? So, how do we reframe what financial wellness is outside of the stock standard salary that we pay people? Because we know that's no longer enough. The environment and the stimuli people receive in the workplace is a priority for a lot of our employees, right? So how many engagement surveys do we do? What is the cadence? Does that cadence make sense? Is it too much, right? Is there overstimulation? From a social perspective, these last 2 years, those of us who've been, largely virtual, right? We've tried virtual yogas and breathing things and all of these things that, almost want to replace those water cooler conversations we had at the office, or that social interaction that we've become so accustomed to. The physical and is obviously a big part of that, and I think particularly in this community and in this space, a lot of you guys are running entities where people are back in the office for the most part, or in some instances there is a hybrid approach. Emotional and spiritual, I think also really kind of stays, I think, top of mind for a lot of employees. So how are we catering for that? Are we carving out time that speaks to people's needs in that sense? And so what we are clear on as HR leaders is that I think the more we are in this realm of figuring, the world of work out, are we hybrid? Are we fully in the office? Is it 3 days, at home, one day at the office, or whatever it is? Wellness is really key. And really the purpose of my conversation is to double down on what financial wellness can look like. What are some of the challenges and some of the trends we're seeing from a research perspective, not only from our market, but I think from other markets that kind of mirror the journey that we're on as Africans. And so going back to, it's not clear this on my screen. So going back then to the question and the seed that I planted 2 slides ago, how important is financial wellness in your organization? How much priority is it given? So on a scale of 1 to 5, 5 being we're shooting the lights out, the benchmarking is done correctly, we've got all the right guardrails in place to support that. 1 being, we're not quite sure yet. We're still trying to figure it out. It's complicated. There's budgetary constraints and the likes. So I think I'll give it like a minute and let's just watch the chat box. Again, this is through the lens of your own experience, or in some instances, perhaps in your sector. Anyone want to be brave enough to unmute themselves and maybe just chat very briefly to us, just in terms of where are you in your organization and in that journey? Or what are some of the challenges and pain points? Are there more people lining up outside of your office asking for advances every month? And that sort of thing, because these are real issues, right? Or should I be brave and randomly pick at somebody? I think I saw Phil from StarTech on the line. Phil, are you there? Do you want to talk us maybe through the journey that you have been with your organization? Philip, can you hear me? Or is he shy?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes,
can you hear me?
Now I can hear you. Wonderful. Yes.
Can you hear? Okay, great. Good morning, everyone. And of course, Andisa, good to see you on this platform. Sure. Look, on a scale of 1 to 5, how important is this? I would actually give it a 5. And I will tell you why. So in our workspace at the moment, we have the pleasure of using your services as of now. We're seeing that there is definitely a need for financial education, because the total number of advances that we are giving on a monthly basis is actually ridiculous. So we need to kind of find a balance, making sure that, you know, we are not just giving out these advances, or whether it's through the internal channels or via float pay. There has to be somewhere where we say, look, wait a minute, you've just been taking so much money. How can we help you? And I think that's the reason why I'm actually rating it a 5 in terms of its importance.
Thank you very much, Philip, and for everyone else's benefit. So I picked on Philip because he's a client of ours, and we've been walking this journey with him. And I think to reiterate his point, there's a danger, I think, in continuing right with that much goodwill when you don't fundamentally understand the problem. So effectively, what you do month on month is you simply treat the symptom and not the root cause. And often the root cause, you know, it requires a journey that you take with your people, on their way to financial resilience, on their way to financial consciousness. And a big part of that comes with the right education, and then you marry the right financial instruments, you know, with the view that as you progress that journey, that over time, you know, they'll ask for less and less advances. They'll start managing their finances better. They'll start having a little bit more liquidity, with the hope that, you know, over time they will then start to save more. And that behavioral shift, is actually what you're wanting to do. So it's not in a short term, but definitely in the long term. So an interesting and a jarring stat, we conducted a qualitative and a quantitative research last year. And the research paper, I think, was shared at the BPESA conference by my colleague Triya Govender last year. But perhaps as a reminder for those of you who weren't in Durban to hear the presentation, is that what we have underestimated is the loss and the direct impact of lost productivity on the GDP, right? So when people are not engaged, they often are not productive. So you might have everybody in your contact center, everyone is bums on seats, they're there, but productivity levels aren't where they ought to be. And this number for me is particularly scary because I think often when we talk about financial wellness, it is often from a superficial perspective, right? You know, there's content, and it gets uploaded on a SharePoint somewhere, or on a modulated system, and you kind of do a spray and pray campaign, and you launch it out and you hope for the best. You hope that people engage with the content. You hope that somewhere along the line, this thing is going to sort itself out. But what we are seeing at a macroeconomic level is the picture is quite dire. So it's costing the country 2% of our annual GDP. And so it is something we ought to be having, a much more comprehensive conversation about. And so if you then take a step back and you understand just sort of where the inflammation points are in that journey, and I suppose the multiple factors that influence labor productivity is, and it's something that's been mentioned today quite extensively, right? The issues and challenges around skills, ability, and I guess just motivation, right? Are people motivated, or are people just simply getting to work, just to make ends meet and kind of moving it on? And so that has a direct impact on how much people are showing up and how much are you as an employer able to kind of get out of them. And I'm using that term quite loosely, but there is a transactionness to the relationship that we have. The role that we play as HR is to unbundle that, right? And to create an environment that fosters a much more holistic relationship between employer and employee. So understanding what motivates and what drives people, depending on your environment, depending on the split with gender and age, and I'll get to that in the next slide. Of course, the use of technology. I think we've seen the sheer scale of what technology can do. So how much technology is available within the organization to drive certain behaviors and to drive high levels of productivity. Ways of work really big, and I think that also speaks to how are people managed. So so have we capacitated our leaders for them to know how to get the best out of people? Conscious leadership is a really, really big conversation right now. Employees are calling us to tasks now more than ever before. In most instances, sometimes with the blessing and of social media, right? You have people who can go and tweet all sorts of things. And so, it has forced us, I think, to look inward. I think for us as HR people to also create an environment for leaders to understand what accountability looks like, to be taken to task when people are not led well or people are mistreated in the organization, because all of those things have a direct impact, towards an organizational bottom line. And so going back to the study that we did, and again, I mean, these are some interesting factors, because I think it is important, again, to understand the root cause of things and not only just treat the symptoms. And what is clear is that there's a direct correlation between financial stress and how people show up in the workplace, right? And things that impact who they are. And you'll see I've listed some of these. I'm not going to go through them line by line. But it is quite obvious that, implications for employers and labor productivity, and again, these have been called out in this forum. So I feel comforted by the fact that we all recognize, some of these inflammatory indicators. And the question we've got to ask ourselves is, how progressive do we want to be in thought and action to resolve some of these? We're not going to solve all of it with just one product or with just one philosophy. But it does give us an opportunity, I think, to trial different things, I think, to think differently about these things. When we look at the workforce, in the context, I think, of what I've just shared, how engaged is your workforce right now? So on a scale of 1 to 5, i.e., if you had a town hall, are your people engaging with your executive team? Are they asking questions when you send out surveys? What is the response rate? Because again, this is another inflammatory indicator that gives us an idea of whether or not, people are quietly quitting. So they're there, they're bums on seats, but they're not really here. And which is why I think it was Shauna earlier who mentioned that often people actually move for an extra $400. It's not even, a fundamental, financial gain. And again, all of these things and those decisions are often triggered by the kind of environment that they're in. So maybe in the chat box, very briefly, I'll give it just under a minute. How engaged is your workforce at the moment? I will see if I can just pick up on the chat box. Clinton, what are your thoughts? Where's your organization on this scale?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Great. Sorry. Okay, we're actually a provider in general, but in my experience recently is, I'd say they most probably engaged at a 2. 3 would be actually pushing it, not to be negative. Yeah. It's just it's just being straightforward. And the thing is, there's a lot. I don't think it's always just about only earning that salary. I think it's also about, like I said in the chat, is I'm coming in and I'm training as somebody to get into the organization, but then that person's there and saying, I'm here to earn so I can get my family through varsity, get him a better education. You know what I mean? There's those issues at home, and they're, in the lack of a better word, saying issues. So I think that's a very big thing, is to say, how are you supporting the family? Again, I've always realized in training is that you may have one person in the organization, but you actually indirectly got 6 with that one person, because they got people they're supporting at home. Right. Many people come in and I've got 4 people depending on my salary. So that's why earlier the speakers have been saying it's still people move around and sometimes move for a bit less, because I've got to bring back something home at night, and that's what's affecting. That's why they are not so engaged, because as you've highlighted, they extremely stressed, and there's rising costs, inflation, etc., and their money needs to cover still the same things irrespective of the rising costs. Yeah. Correct. Thank you so much for that. And you bang on the money, right? And it's a thing we've got to recognize is, 1, black tax is real, and I think 2, the definition of family, is not through a Western familiar lens. And I think often we design programs and we design these things through a very different lens, forgetting that, to your point, right, there are people in one home and there are, extended family members, their cousins, their,
someone else's niece, child, and everything else in between. And in the context of that little family, that's family, and then effectively whoever's the breadwinner, right? Like then their salary has to see to all of these individuals. I'm just going to read out one or two comments here in the chat box. I'm so appreciative of what Alvin said. And Alvin, I'm just going to call it out if you don't mind, that economic factors in SA are challenging for all levels. This is a driver for attrition seen, as well as where individuals are looking for opportunities to earn more to offset the rise in costs. Absolutely. And it really does kind of, solidify, I think, the point Clinton and I were just making just around, inflation's through the roof, our epileptic energy crises, I think also further compounds the issue. Now people often, load shedding kicks in at a certain hour, you haven't cooked, you must buy takeout, or you must make some kind of other plan that is outside of what you had budgeted for, therefore really compounding, an already bad situation into a worse situation. Is there anyone else in the audience who would want to just quick comment on that, in case I've missed something in the chat box? Nope. Oopsie. Hello.
Yes, we can still see. Yeah, you just.
Okay. Great. Okay. Perfect. Okay. I want to assume there's no other comments. Right. Let's keep moving with the slides. Right. So, so employee well-being has, and I think continues to be about, yes, improving productivity from a company level, but I think
are you still
also
presenting
really,
on your side? Are you still sharing
yes,
slides on your side? Because we're not seeing them on our side.
You're not seeing them. Okay. 2 seconds. Let's just try this again. I am on load shedding, so I will say that. So I'd hoped this can sustain itself, but in the absence of the slides, and I'm conscious of time, I'm happy just to simply continue, if you can still hear me. And then following this conversation, I will share the slide deck that can be made available to everybody. Is that all right?
Yeah, you can share them later. I'm happy, but you can just proceed now. Thank you.
Okay, perfect. Apologies for that. And so if we look at some of the generational differences in terms of workplace expectations, and I think we have seen this shift as employers for quite a while now, is that you've got the younger population between 18 and 24-year-olds who are just starting to enter the workforce. So their financial responsibilities are fundamentally different, but they're also on the cusp of that age where a lot of material errors just around financial management often occur, right? So they are taking up they're maxing out the Edgar's account and the Fashini account, and they're blowing up their credit cards. They don't quite understand, the interest rate and how bad this is. And it often takes then 10, 15 years to recover from some of this. And I think that is why, particularly when we talk about, the future is youth, it really is, kind of that in mind. I mean, if you look at even our own population in South Africa, we're a relatively young population. And so it's quite important, I think, when we get them in quite young. So whether it is people that are coming in from feeder programs, from graduate programs, that we arm them with the right tools and instruments much earlier on to circumvent around the mistakes that we're seeing with the folks that are either in the 35 to 45 year bracket, right? Who then have to spend a decade trying to recover from financial mistakes that they've made. It would be amiss of me to not, I think, double down on I think the aspect of women empowerment, particularly considering that we've just celebrated International Women's Day a couple of days ago. From a women perspective, an interesting stat for everyone's benefit, 42% of South African households are headed by women, and that is a big number. Women, naturally and organically are community builders. It's in our DNA. So often a lot of, what we spend on is usually, household expenses, right? Educating children, food, making sure that everyone's comfortable at home. And so it's important, I think, when we talk about empowerment and what does that look like from a woman perspective, we understand some of the financial burden that our women employees are often carrying. And so when we want to advance the conversation around pay equity as part of the journey to building financial wellness, it really is important, and probably arguably the most crucial factor in empowering women is to really look at pay equity. What does that look like? What are those gaps? What are we as an organization willing to do to either, bring those gaps closer and or look at complementary programs and make those available? And so they often, for me, I always advocate that there is a strong business case for supporting female employees to build financial wellness. I think one is, there's a change of attitude at work. I think two, it shifts their views on management and leadership, right? People feel seen. They feel that management understand their woes. They feel that management or leaders are looking for solutions, even if they can't table something. But I think just that knowledge alone is so empowering. And I think also lastly, just the improvement on productivity and just contributing positively to their physical and mental wealth. And so it is quite important that we understand the impact of that pay equity, and I think bringing that to life and really coming up with solutions that assist that. Earlier on, there was a big conversation around attracting and retaining the best people, and I think as the world changes, and I think as there's advancement on different work experiences and different employers, what is clear from a talent perspective is people want fair and equitable pay. That goes without saying. People want professional development opportunities. That is always top of mind. Almost instinctively, every time I've interviewed people in the last 6 months, that question comes up quite a lot. Like, what is your philosophy to personal development? What is your company willing to do about that? And so it's forcing us, to think more purposefully around learning labs. Who can we partner with? And I know there were quite a few people in this audience that play in that space. A compelling employee value proposition is incredibly important. I think as we are still trying to figure out this paradigm of hybrid, people want to know that they're coming into environments where the environment has been curated with thought, action, and not necessarily speed. That there are the right programs in place to speak to, how can I become a better employee in the space? And of course, what underpins that is holistic and inclusive people practices, right? So for us to move away from, I think, just using HR policies just to simply govern, but how do we create, policies and people practices that are inclusive and that take into account, the different individuals that exist in our organizations. What has been clear from a lot of the research that we've seen and the research that we have done is that high-performing teams are high-belonging teams, right? So people, that can foster, or rather employers that can foster a sense of belonging amongst everyone in the business, tend to see, teams that are really high-performing. Because you don't have issues like trust deficit. People really trust that the organization has got their best interests at heart, and people really kind of understand that I can show up fully for my team because my organization shows up for me. And so there's a direct correlation between high performing teams and high belonging teams. And so, when we talk about gender equity, I do think we've come a long way. I think from a macroeconomic perspective, and I think also particularly in this sector. And I guess, it's got to be a question we've got to ask ourselves: what more are we willing to do? So whilst the silver bullet is not, paying, increases that are out of cycle all the time, what are complementary programs that are in place that, that or service providers that we can work alongside with to, to better curate, and I think to better put in the right instruments and tools to help curb some of those challenges around advances, around, people needing to, to borrow more money and to use up all of their credit. And so a big part of what we do at FloatPays is really kind of drive, some of those conversations. I think one from a philosophy perspective in helping employers understand, where their challenges are, through our strategic partnerships with the likes of Standard Bank and a few other partners in our ecosystem that help from an instrument perspective in bringing financial wellness to life. A big driver that we do is the education piece, and Phil alluded to that earlier. We have got, modulated, programs and modules that really peel back some of the language, because what we have found also in our research is that people have often signed, contracts with different service providers, not understanding the terms and conditions, not being aware of payment terms, of interest rates, and all of those things. And that in itself has perpetuated these debt cycles that we're seeing, that people are really struggling to come out of. And then lastly, I think the piece that has actually been such a labor of love and has really kind of proven that when people have got the education and the right instruments, the intent is there, the will is there. But, people are often lacking in terms of having, access to instruments. Is we launched a savings product that is an interest-bearing savings product. And again, I think for us, if the stokvel market is anything to go by, I mean, in this country, the stokvel market is a 50 billion rand business. A large component of that 50 billion rand is actually unbanked. So what we do know is that people want to save, people often lack the discipline. And so when you then start introducing a product like FloatPays, where, your ability to save is directly linked to your paycheck, all of a sudden it shifts the dynamic. And we've seen this. If I can very quickly use an example of a client of ours in KZN, who last year when those KZN floods happened, we thought, they have about 6,000 employees. And we assumed that everyone would just simply stop saving, number one, because there's a crisis, there's a natural disaster, people have lost their homes. They would completely cash out what they had saved at that time, which was, I think, 6 months into the year or whatever it was. And actually the inverse happened. Only 2% of that 6,000 actually, drew out some funds. But actually the cadence in which people were saving didn't fundamentally shift. And so it's understanding, I think, data points like this, I think for us that really help us to have the right quality conversation with employers. And so financial wellness in its entirety, I think we have to move from just the philosophy and putting out to just, modules and hope for the best. But to understand that, when we double down on it, it is also an indicator that helps you retain your people, because all of a sudden now it shifts that perception. Now people know that as an employer, your intent. So whilst liquidity might be an issue, right? You can't issue out, increases to keep up, with inflation, but you certainly are willing to look at alternative products that can work side by side with your compensation model, to help people, to support them when they need it the most. And so I think with that, I'm mindful also of time allocation. I will park it here. The slides I will make available. I am willing to engage, I think, with those of you who may be uncertain about how do you have this conversation with your excos? How do you have the conversation with your payroll people in terms of rethinking what financial wellness is? What is that benefit? What could it look like for your organization? I could take you through some case studies, and we could definitely carve out a path that supports your thinking and that supports the journey that you're on in your efforts to curate and to build out your EVP. So I think with that, Sam, I will park it here and see if there's questions. I'll also try and pick up on the chat box if I've missed anything.
Yeah, I was going to read for you, Lynn Gelland in the chat box put a comment. I feel like we need to balance packages that are fair and ensure that the business remains profitable. That being said, things like taxi strike, load shedding, it's also about educating people on how to manage money. If you can comment on that before I move to Alvin Stanumugam.
Sure.
Yeah,
100%. And Lynn, you're absolutely correct, right? I think also the thing we've got to, I think, also peel back the layer on is that whilst it is cost effective for companies to pay people once a month, once a week, or whatever it is, you know, if you look at just some of the challenges that you've highlighted, these are everyday struggles. And so yes, absolutely, that education piece is fundamental to changing that. But for people who perhaps lack the discipline or haven't had the privilege of being taught how to manage their money, right? You know, to ensure that, you know, that you've got a little bit of fat, you know, that'll cover you, you know, in the event of some of these challenges. And that's sort of where, you know, our platform plays in, is that it, you know, we can segment things so that, you know, you can get vouchers for electricity as an example. I mean, when there is electricity, that, you know, if there's a taxi strike, right, you can double down, you know, and get access. And let's say now there's a taxi strike, now you've got to catch the Gautrain, or, you know, or alternative methods that will cost you more money than what you had in your budget. And so the reality is that if we really all wanted to disrupt the informal lending sector, which thrives on the back foot of people's desperation and the crisis that we all find ourselves in, we've got to think differently around compensation models. And that's why, for me, I always advocate and say it's always an opportunity for us to rethink. I know it is very difficult for us as HR people to often engage with our business leaders. Some of them tend to be quite paternalistic, depending on the environment that you're in. And I mean, I have these engagements more often than not, and I've heard every reason and every rationale and every excuse under the table. But the reality is quite simple. If you don't want to see, you know, your attrition rate shooting out because people are simply accepting 600 Rand more, is it not worth your while to engage with alternative providers such as FlowPays, and there are others in the market, to rethink a couple of things to curb against that? And it really is, again, you know, because of the crisis that we're in, and, you know, and the heightened financial stress that people are under, which is so profound. It really profoundly impacts your bottom line. And, you know, if you have the willingness to do that, now is, I think, the time more than ever to I think have the conversation at least. But the reality is, you know, people aren't moved. I mean, I interview people all the time. There's many instances where people have said to me, actually, Andy, I'm actually going to move across. I'm happy to make a lateral move. Like, I just feel like my current employer isn't invested in who I am as an individual. So it's not even about the money anymore. I'm quite happy to make a lateral move. We're seeing that more often than not. And so, you know, if we really then are going to look at, you know, our EVPs, you know, it's got to be outside of the bounds of the traditional models that we've become accustomed to the last 15, 20 years, because they are no longer fit for purpose. And that just simply is the reality.
Thanks. And I've got raised up a hand. Lynn, do you want to go ahead? You've raised up your hand.
Hi, yes, you guys, can you hear me?
Yes,
perfectly,
we can hear
now,
you.
Sissy.
Perfect. I 100% agree with you. And I think if I can take my comment back a little bit, a big gap to me overall in our country at the moment, well, especially in the Western Cape, is I fundamentally believe that a lot of the kids that matriculate, they have no sense of money management. They have no sense of budget. They have no sense of financial planning. So they come into the work environment not knowing any better than anybody else. They get, and I'm going to be honest, because of the poaching that we mentioned earlier on, poaching has resulted in us as competitors, as operators, creating amazing packages for individuals. And, you know, you're trying to outvote each other or trying to outsell each other all the time. So the packages, I would arguably say, are actually quite good. But your challenge is you will still get individuals coming in, and it's a phenomenon that I don't know if other operators have experienced. We call it payday absence. You know, so it's on payday, you're going to have your highest absence on that day. Why? because I've got money now, and as opposed to using it in the appropriate manner, I'm going to use it to go out and give myself a good time or go and party or whatever. And it's just, to me, it's, if we take it back to that fundamental level, that's where we're missing something. And therefore, I feel that us as a forum, including the providers on this platform, it's something that's got to be so critical in all of the programs that we are running via this community that teaches our youth those sort of skills right at a secondary school level already, so that when they enter a lot more prepared for the world of work. They know how to manage their money. They can make better decisions. They can make the right decision about, do I spend this money on buying a beer tonight or on catching a taxi tomorrow? Yeah.
Right.
So yeah, that's all from me. Thank you.
No, thank you, Lynn. You were spot on. And in fact, your comment, your feedback now was linked to what Alvin Shanmugam. Am I pronouncing it correctly, Alvin? Your name?
Yeah, all good. Thanks.
Okay. So I also just do you want to say something about your comment, Alvin?
No, I think just to echo Lynn's sentiments. I think especially in our industry, we hire a lot of out of schoolers. New hire. That's quite a high density of the individuals that come into our organizations. So 100% spot on. These guys don't get that financial support at that levels, and as they progress in their career, if the grounding's not there, we just create more of a storm as these individuals progress if they stay within the environment as well. So yeah, back to that initial one where yes, 100% economic issues, etc. We have that free flow where people are just looking for an opportunity to earn a few rand extra. But that will never go away unless they get a good grounding on what do I make the most of what I'm getting right now. And then yes, you will progress at later stages, you will potentially get bigger offers, etc. But you can do more with your money versus just living from paycheck to paycheck. Yeah.
No, spot on. Sis Anissa, in closing, I'm going to give over to you. Any last comments or high level summary? You did assure all of us that we will get the link and your slides. We'll send them to Bhumi so that all the attendees can also get your slides. Apologies for that technical challenge we had earlier on. Over to you. Any closing remarks or points or summaries, Sisi?
Sure. I mean, I think just to highlight a couple of things. I think we've got to understand the responsibility that lays on our shoulders as HR people. To not only create a work experience, I mean, the actions and the decisions that we take, whether it is, getting in new technology into the workplace or whatever, have got such a long-lasting impact on people's lives and people's careers. And I think that's why we've got to be so intentional. I mean, outside of me, now, sounding like a salesperson, I want to sound more like an HR person that I am. But we also are just at this crux. And there's a shift in the world, and we all know it, we all see it. South Africa as a country is very fertile ground for external investors coming in, setting up shop, coming in with very progressive programs that they have in place. I mean, if you look at the likes of, we don't even have to mention names, AWS and Microsoft and all of these global conglomerates that come here outside of just basic salaries, and I think the things we've all been accustomed to are a lot of ancillary programs that add so much value to the overall employee experience. I mean, I know people, and I worked at an IT firm who, said my difficulty with leaving this place is not so much the money. I know I can get a good counter offer. What I can't get is all of these ancillary benefits that are available at this particular company that I know other companies haven't thought of. And that is the real sweet spot. So you really kind of want to be at that place that even when someone is offering your young employees or your mid-career hires an extra 1,000 rand, they'll think and they'll go, yeah, they don't have float pays, they don't have this, they don't have extra work days, they don't have whatever it is, right? And that becomes the deciding factor to them staying and actually turning down more money. Is all about the ancillary work that you've got to do side by side to really elevate, their employee experience. And again, I can tell you for free, I mean, I've picked up people in the market recently, to building out our tech team. And people came from very, very big companies, and they've made it very clear to me, in the negotiation process, they're like, it's not even about the money anymore. It really is about, the ancillary benefits and, and what kind of work experience are you curating that I will enjoy as a person and I will grow from. And so I think as HR people, we really are at that place where we really are in the driving seat. And I know it sounds corny, and I think, we hear it all the time. But we really are at that place for us to rethink a couple of things. The opportunity is there. Our people need us to show intent in the programs and the products that we integrate into their daily work life.
100%, and thank you for that, and well done for a very good presentation, but also just engaging and giving practical solutions for us as we manage our employees. We look forward to have you in other sessions. We as the HR family, HR community, we hope that the next image you will see in your slide or in your profile pic, it will be you climbing some mountain in South America, having moved from Tanzania. We're not going to mention the country and the mountain, but the only condition we can invite you to present in the next HR forum is when you have a picture of you climbing a mountain in South America. And Kakulu, thank you very much, Sis Andy. Colleagues, we've only got about 4 minutes remaining. I want to use this time wisely. A bit of good news. Going forward, we would like to have HR forums in person per region, whether that's KZN or Gauteng. And yes, people from the Eastern Cape, is it Gqeberha or is it Port Elizabeth? I never know. We'll also have one also for Gqeberha as well. So we would like to have sessions in the region, in person as well. That means then that there will have to be a lot of participation. So in the remaining time, if you can please write in the chat box, what are some of the topics that you would like to be addressed, some of the speakers or programs that you would like in the in-person HR forum sessions? Because some of you've been very quiet. Even Renee from the other side of South Africa has also been very quiet. Nonsindi, so Mfuduka, going away in Mfuduka, Road Trek, you've also been very quiet as well. In the chat box, colleagues, can you please just take a minute, write down what are some of the topics you would like an HR forum to address, to be presented or to be processed? Giving over just only 1 minute, colleagues, in the chat box, please. Wow, Chantal, just you're on the money, huh? Data is becoming big in the HR space. Thank you, Chantal. Other people, what are some of the topics or some of the things you would like to see happening in the next HR forum?
Samkelo, like just a reminder about the spot survey if you haven't seen the message yet. Okay.
Okay, spot on. Yeah, thanks, Rash. While you're busy typing, what are some of the topics you would like to see being discussed in the in-person HR forums? We have a national shutdown coming up next week, Monday. BPESA, to protect this industry and to mitigate, you're all going to be receiving a survey. If you can just please complete that survey and please just do a quick response in terms of we're asking you certain questions and also what you propose can be done, and also where are you with regards to that national shutdown as well. So if you are in this industry, as you're sitting in this meeting, you'll get a survey about the national shutdown coming next week. Some specific questions. One, because we want to have an industry body response. Two, we want to have practical business solutions to that so that it does not affect our industry, but also does not affect the continuity and the running of the business. So please do continue to check your junk and your spam emails. And please, colleagues, please, friends, associates, HR compatriots, sons and daughters of human resources, please do complete the survey, because that data, that insights help us to have a combined response that is strategic, but also mitigates a risk for us as employees, but also for the industry as well. Thanks for that reminder, Rachel. That was a very good one. Okay, something around EVPs has come up, wellness, data. Any other comments, colleagues? Any other thing? Thank you. Just a reminder again, the link with the recording will be sent by Mpumi to you for in terms of what happened in this meeting, the recording and what was discussed. You would have that if you did register for this session. Wow, Chantal, I like that one. Future ways of working infrastructure for our employees. Colleagues, with that being said, we've had a very good HR forum, starting with Rashni around job numbers, around inclusive hiring, around being an employer of choice, around resourcefulness, Shona and Gareth and Adam, they were a star around developing talent, growing our leaders, really investing in the next pipeline and the right kind of skills. We had Tracy speaking to us about the skills survey. Don't forget to complete that together with the National Shutdown Survey. And Andy has been more than amazing, just giving us a breakdown on how to manage, how to help our employees with their finances, and also what Float Pays does in terms of partnering with organizations like yours. Lynn, thank you very much for those questions. So thank you to all of you for attending this HR forum. We'll let you know what's coming up next, the in-persons and where they're gonna be. And as always, we'll try and include all of the programs that you've mentioned, our vendors, our suppliers, our BPESA family, our HR compatriots, from HR advisor, HR recruiter, learning and development, talent acquisition, HR managers. Those of you sat in this call, played with WhatsApp, who looked at Facebook, responded to emails. Thank you very much for coming, and enjoy the rest of your day, colleagues. If you're able to drive a vehicle in South Africa, please do drive safely. Thank you, colleagues.